Hey, welcome. When we talk about our food system, we're all usually looking for quick, simple answers. But today, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to see how the single most powerful tool for really understanding what's on your plate, well, it isn't an answer at all. It's a question. So let's just start with one. Think about your last meal. And I mean, really think about it. Where did it come from? And no, not just the store, but way before that. Who grew it? What did it take to get all the way to you? Just that one question, right? It opens up an entire world. And that's really what this is all about. We're going to walk through a few key questions that, when you put them all together, they paint a picture of our modern food system. They connect the dots between your own health, the giant industry behind what we eat, and honestly, the future of the planet. Okay, let's get into it. First up, we're going to start with the most personal piece of this puzzle, the connection we all have to food, how it impacts our bodies and our health. Okay, so this first question, it gets right to the heart of a huge paradox we're living in. How is it possible that we have all this agricultural abundance, more food than ever, but at the same time, we're facing rising rates of diet-related disease? This question forces us to stop and look at the kind of food the system is churning out. So what's really fascinating here is the trade-off this reveals. The system has gotten incredibly good at producing cheap calories, mostly from things like processed corn and soy. But the catch is, these calories are often empty. They're stripped of the nutrients our bodies actually need. So for a lot of families, the cheapest choice at the grocery store is also the least healthy. This leads to what experts call the double burden, this bizarre reality where people can be overfed on calories, but at the very same time be undernourished because they're missing essential vitamins and minerals. In this question, this one pushes us even further. It asks us to think about the fact that for millions of people, it's not even about making a choice. In places we call food deserts, getting access to fresh, healthy food is incredibly difficult, sometimes impossible. And that creates these deep, deep inequalities where your health can be determined just by where you happen to live. It's a powerful idea. Your zip code can actually be more important than your genetic code. Okay, so we've seen the impact on our health. But how in the world did we get here? To figure that out, we need to zoom out and look at the massive, complicated system that's actually creating these results. Now, at first glance, this just looks like a tangled mess, right? And honestly, that's kind of the point. The journey our food takes is not a straight line. It's this huge web of things like global trade agreements, government policies, corporate power. They all have a hand in what ends up on our plates. But let's zero in on one of the biggest players in this whole web. So, who's actually calling the shots in this web? Well, this next question points us right to the answer. It brings up a really important concept called vertical integration. Basically, that's when one single company controls pretty much every step of the process, from the very beginning all the way to the supermarket shelf. And this is a perfect illustration of how that works. A few giant corporations can end up controlling the animal feed, owning the processing plants, and telling retailers what they get. And who's stuck in the middle? The farmer. They're left with very little power, often trapped in these restrictive contracts, basically turning them into something like contract workers on their very own land. And here it is. This is where we connect everything back to that first section. Remember those cheap processed calories we were talking about? Well, why are they everywhere? A big part of the answer is government policies, like subsidies that encourage farmers to grow massive amounts of crops like corn and soy. All that surplus then becomes the super cheap ingredient for processed foods and animal feed, which totally shapes the entire food landscape and what's available for us to buy. All right, so we've looked at our health and we've looked at the system itself. For this last part, we'll use our questions to explore what all this means for the planet and what the path forward to a more sustainable future might look like. This question really gets to the heart of a huge conflict we're dealing with today. The industrial food system was basically designed with one goal in mind, getting the biggest possible yield. But that relentless focus on producing as much as possible, as cheaply as possible, often comes with a huge environmental price tag. It can damage our soil, our water, and our climate, which ironically undermines the very resilience we need to keep feeding ourselves long term. So where do we go from here? The cool thing is, the questions themselves kind of give us a roadmap. They suggest we need to rethink things like subsidies to support different kinds of farming, maybe enforce laws to break up some of this concentrated corporate power, demand better labeling so we actually know what's in our food, and of course, support all the people who are out there working to build more local, more transparent, and more sustainable systems. When you put it all together, what all these questions really lead to is a huge shift in how we see ourselves. Instead of just being a passive consumer at the end of this long, complicated chain, we can start to see that we're actually the beginning. Every single time you buy food, you're sending a signal all the way back through that system. It's like a vote for the kind of food system you want. And that brings us right here to our final question. And this one's for you. From asking where your own food comes from, to supporting a local farmer, to pushing for bigger policy changes, how will you use these questions to help shape the future of food? Because really, understanding the system and changing it, it all begins and ends with having the courage to ask.